Are we going to have a recession in the United States?
As I said on Monday at a talk that I gave at the New York Economic Club, I think we're very close, if not in a recession now. What may be
You don't need that.
good. What may be happening is a lot of people are buying in advance of the elevated increases, like lines around Apple stores buying iPhones and all
Yes.
that stuff. But I believe all the uncertainty is really making everyone pause, and everyone's waiting and seeing. And so I think you're going to see across the board, it just say slow down until we have more certainty.
Yeah.
And, we now have a 90-day pause on the reciprocal tariff.
In this recent interview, Larry Fink shared some pretty revealing thoughts about the current state of the economy. And honestly, the message was clear. We're either right on the edge of a recession, or we may already be in one. They opened up by saying that from their perspective, we're very close to that tipping point. And this wasn't just speculation. It was based on what they're seeing in the market, from consumer behavior to business decisions. The atmosphere right now, economically speaking, is full of uncertainty, and that's starting to show in how people are acting. One of the points they brought up was about consumer spending, particularly the kind of spending that looks strong on the surface but may not reflect long-term confidence. For example, there are still long lines outside Apple stores. People are still buying iPhones and other high-demand products. But the speaker suggested that a lot of this may be buying in advance, a kind of panic or defensive spending where consumers are trying to get ahead of anticipated price increases, especially with inflation and tariffs looming in the background. So while it may look like demand is holding up, it's not necessarily because people feel good about the economy. It could be more about fear that prices will go up or that supply will run out. That's very different from the kind of spending you see when people are confident and optimistic. And it's not just consumers. Larry Fink noted that a lot of businesses are also pulling back. There's a general mood of hesitation across the board. People are pausing, waiting, trying to see how things unfold before making any major decisions. That kind of widespread caution can really slow down economic activity, and in many cases, that's exactly what leads to a recession. They also mentioned a recent 90-day pause on reciprocal tariffs, which is a slight easing of the trade tensions we've been seeing. And while that's a step in the right direction, it's not enough to eliminate the bigger cloud of uncertainty that's hanging over the economy. Trade wars, shifting policies, global instability, it's all contributing to this general sense of unease. So the big picture here is this. While we're still seeing some areas of spending, a lot of it may not be sustainable. And when you combine that with uncertainty in the markets, cautious business activity, and global trade tensions, it paints a picture of an economy that's slowing down and may already be in recession territory. Let's get back to the interview.
I've heard this now many number of times, similar to early days of COVID, like 5 years ago.
Sure.
I just don't know what's coming. I have nothing to expect, and so I'm keeping my head down. Is that a fair way to sort of characterize?
I think that's a bad answer because today you need to run into the uncertainty and try to find solutions.
Okay.
So keeping your head down, I would not like that as an answer as a shareholder with any CEO.
Right.
I mean, to me, this is an opportunity to look for opportunities. And because of all our clients having uncertainty, we are spending more time with more conversation with more clients globally than any time. Our job now is to be, helping, calming, giving them ideas. So if a CEO said, I'm going to keep my head down.
Well, I guess that was the way one characterized it. But I guess it's the uncertainty itself that creates an inability to do long-term planning in terms of capital allocation.
There's
right
no
now.
question CapEx is falling right now until you have better understanding where should that CapEx go. But I do believe, as I said in my talk this morning,
yes.
I do believe the mega trends are still with us, whether it's AI, data centers, infrastructure, the whole reorientation of our economy. So I think the mega force trends are not going to change by what is happening now, but maybe the execution of some of these trends may be delayed, may be pushed out longer, but I still remain to be optimistic over the long run. Yes, we have to recalibrate. Yes, I do believe we're probably starting, if not, we're in a recession. Yes, I think the market is still underestimating how high inflation can get. If you factor in all the tariffs,
right,
you factor in all these other issues, it's going to be quite additive. I mean, I read in a report that if you just take the tariffs in the cost of home building, the average new home could be up as much as 26%.
In this next part of the conversation, Larry Fink responds to a comparison that's been made several times lately, that the current environment feels a lot like the early days of COVID about 5 years ago. There's this widespread uncertainty, this sense of, I don't know what's coming next, which is making a lot of people want to keep their heads down, wait it out, and not make any bold moves. But Larry Fink pushes back on that idea. They say quite firmly that keeping your head down in times like this is not a good answer, especially if you're a CEO. In fact, from the perspective of a shareholder, they'd be pretty disappointed with that kind of response. Instead, they argue that now is exactly the time to lean into the uncertainty, to run toward the challenges and to look for solutions. In their view, uncertain times are actually full of opportunity, especially for those who are willing to have conversations, understand client concerns, and offer support. They shared that their team is now spending more time talking with clients around the world than ever before. Their focus is on helping, advising, and giving those clients ideas to navigate this volatile environment. That's where value can really be added. Now, the other side of the discussion acknowledges that the uncertainty itself is making long-term planning really difficult, particularly when it comes to capital allocation. Companies don't know where to direct their investments because the economic signals are so unclear. As a result, capital expenditures, CapEx, are falling. Businesses are holding back until there's a clearer sense of direction. But despite that, the speaker remains optimistic about the long term. They believe that the major megatrends, like artificial intelligence, data centers, infrastructure development, and the broader transformation of the global economy, are still very much intact. What we're seeing now might delay some of the execution on those trends, but it won't stop them. However, there are still real headwinds. Larry Fink reiterates their belief that we may already be in a recession or are at least entering one. And they caution that the market is still underestimating the full impact of inflation, especially when you factor in rising tariffs and other cost drivers. For example, they cited a report estimating that the average cost of building a new home could increase by as much as 26% due to tariffs alone, a massive figure with wide-reaching implications. So, the message here is pretty clear. While it's tempting to retreat in times of uncertainty, leaders and investors need to stay proactive. Yes, recalibration is necessary, and yes, it's a tough environment. But long-term optimism still holds, especially if we can navigate the short-term challenges with clarity and purpose. Let's go back to the video.
The United States post-World War II was a global stabilizer. We are the global destabilizer.
Right, right.
Now, Larry, that's a very hard thing to say, because I pride ourselves of being, bringing the leadership, bringing the conversations. But I will say the power of U.S. capitalism is still alive. I will say more and more times clients worldwide are asking for our, at least at the CEO level, they're asking for our vision, our views. Another economic force, Jim, post-World War II was consumerism. So we built the whole foundation of economic policy around consumerism, providing Americans with the cheapest products that it could. And so that was the foundation. Now, did that come at a cost that some of our communities were decimated, where they lost jobs? Absolutely. So maybe we went too far on the whole concept of consumerism. But let's be clear, the major economic foundation was based on consumerism. And so we wanted our companies to go around the world to find the best places to provide the highest quality at the cheapest prices, so we could consume more. And we always thought that type of consumption was the most progressive form of economic behavior. More people could have more. And that was one of the fundamental reasons why the United States was the leader. Yes. Because our citizens were huge consumers.
Let's take a moment to zoom out and look at the big picture, because what was said here touches on something truly foundational to how the modern global economy works. After World War II, the United States didn't just rebuild itself, It stepped into a new role as the global stabilizer. That meant using its economic strength, political influence, and military presence to help create a world that was, at least relatively, stable and open for growth. It's a legacy that's hard to fully capture, but one we're still living in today. Larry Fink even mentioned how hard it is to talk about this without sounding prideful. But the truth is, American capitalism, with all its flaws and complexities, has played a massive role in shaping the modern world. And what's really telling? Even now, in today's uncertain economic landscape, CEOs and business leaders from around the globe that are still turning to the US, not just for capital or markets, but for vision. They want to understand how the US sees the future. That says a lot about the staying power of American influence. Now, alongside that global role, there was another major force that emerged in the post-World War II era: consumerism. America didn't just grow economically, it built an entire system around giving people access to affordable goods. The idea was simple. If we can make products cheap and available, people will spend more, demand will increase, and the economy will keep expanding. And so we did everything we could to support that vision. This led to US companies going global in search of cheaper production. We outsourced, we imported, we optimized the entire supply chain around one goal: giving Americans access to the highest quality goods at the lowest possible price. That became the foundation of US economic policy for decades. And to be fair, it worked. It helped drive growth, raise living standards, and keep inflation in check for a long time. But of course, there was a cost. Many communities in America, especially those reliant on manufacturing, were hit hard. Jobs disappeared. Entire industries moved offshore. Towns that once thrived on local industry saw their economies crumble. So while consumerism drove the overall economy forward, it also left certain groups behind. Tom Lee doesn't shy away from that truth. They acknowledge the damage, but also remind us that this consumer-driven model wasn't an accident. It was the intentional foundation of post-war economic strategy. And now, decades later, we're still dealing with the consequences of that approach, both the good and the bad. So what does that mean for today? It means we're at a crossroads. As global dynamics shift, as inflation rises, as supply chains realign, and as new technologies like AI redefine productivity, we need to reimagine what our next foundation will be. The world is watching, and the US still has a leadership role to play, especially when it comes to setting the tone for how the economies move forward in uncertain times. If you're interested in understanding the real economic forces that shape markets, influence policy, and impact your investments, make sure to hit that like button. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more insights on global trends, financial strategy, and long-term market shifts.